Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Friday, February the 27th, and a special edition of Politics at Sam and Anne's. Shortly after 4 a.m, the worst fears of the Labour Party confirmed. A catastrophic defeat in the South Manchester seat of Gorton and Denton, which had been Labour for nearly 100 years, at the hands of the Greens.
I didn't grow up wanting to be a politician. I'm a plumber. And 2 weeks ago, during all this, I also qualified as a plasterer. Because even in chaos, even under pressure, I get things done.
It wasn't even close, with the Greens winning just over 40% of the vote. Reform UK in second, but on 29%, Labour third. A 26.4% swing from Labour to the Greens, way more than the polls would suggest at the moment nationally. What are the consequences? What are the lessons? We'll give you everything you need to know in 20 minutes. My name is Sam Coates of Sky News.
And I'm Anne McElvoy from Politico. A sensational result for a jubilant Green Party, and already accusations of possible cheating coming from Nigel Farage amid claims from election observers that there was family voting, groups of voters together in voting booths. But no mistake, this is a massive and damaging moment for Keir Starmer, and the pressure will be building. Labour surely knows he was responsible for blocking the Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham as the candidate. He was pursuing a strategy of uniting progressive forces against reform, but now he's responsible for an outcome that has seen votes bleed in large numbers to the Greens and Labour in third place.
I was up all night on Sky News, and the first sign that things were going the Greens' way was a really remarkably high turnout. Now, normally you see a drop-off in by-elections compared to general elections in this seat. It weren't particularly high turnouts at all. But this time, 47% of the electorate turned out, just a smidgen below the general election. For whatever reason, this by-election did infuse or terrify the people of Gorton and Denton, and they turned out in large numbers. Voters being unusually energised had tended to benefit the anti-mainstream parties.
The veteran political analyst Peter Kellner has been writing this morning that he sees the nearest equivalent to this as Brent East in 2003. Labour had won by a mile in 2001. The Liberal Democrats scored just over 10%. Sarah Tether, people with long memories might remember, won the seat for the Lib Dems on a 29% swing, and the overwhelmingly left-of-centre electorate there finding a way to punish Tony Blair in the wake of the Iraq War. And he sees some echoes of that in what's happening in Gorton and Denton. Spare a thought too for the Lib Dems. They used to be the by-election champions against Labour, but here it was just a few hundred votes. They were nowhere near. But let's start with the big winners, the Greens, and what it's going to mean for them.
Look, I think for the Greens, it's just a whole load of firsts and records broken for them. Their first by-election win ever in 87 attempts. They never got more than 10% in a by-election in the past. So something has changed there. It's the first ever Green MP in the north of England. That was one of the big things that Zach Polansky highlighted at the start. Indeed, it's the first victory at the first election test for Zach Polansky. He was only elected as Green leader in the autumn. He has transformed that party and shown that the Greens now have potency on non-Green issues. This looks like it was a vote that hinged heavily on immigration and attitudes to Gaza. The new MP becomes only the 18th candidate in the last 100 years to take her party at from third to first at a by-election. And today, I think the result will shake the whole of Westminster. Electoral calculations are going to be redrawn all over the place. But we'll deal with other parties later in the fallout there. And as it is the Greens' moment, you have to hand it to them. Do you just want to tell us a little bit about the newest Member of Parliament?
Well, indeed. Hannah Spencer is the new face for the Greens at Westminster. Massive breakthrough for her. She does have one very useful skill, apart from winning by-elections. Playbook today has a nice account of her life until this point, and a touch in her speech, which was quite charming when she apologised to any of her plumbing clients. She wasn't going to be able to fulfil their appointments. So cancel the work you booked in because I'm headed to Parliament, which has got to be one of the better plumbers' excuses. And I learned from my colleague Sam Blewett, who's written an in-depth profile of her, that she has 4 rescue greyhounds and also came 4th in the 2024 Greater Manchester mayoral election. She's tried a few times, and she clearly doesn't give up, Hannah Spencer. And in her victory speech, notably light on what you could call the classic green issues. She talked a bit about broken Britain, a bit of a riff about litter and fly tipping and dirty air, but not so much on the conservation end of the Green Party, much bigger on social justice, noisy about the parties of billionaire donors. Note parties there, so that seemed to be tipping Labour as well as the Tories, certainly, and a sign that the Greens plan to attack Labour from the left in the coming months and beyond, and looking to the next general election.
So that means that the Green Party now goes from 4 to 5 MPs. I have to say, Anne, you said something that rang an alarm bell for Labour. Hannah Spencer stood in the last mayoral election. In other words, the last time there was the Manchester Metro contest, Andy Burnham beat her. I think that is a bruise that some people will want to push. Another bruise, I thought, there was something in Hannah Spencer's manner that really reminded me of Andy Burnham. She had a charm and an easygoing nature about her, and an ability to riff that did actually echo him, but less so the Labour candidate, which I thought was quite striking, don't you think?
It's a really good point. It's that just getting used to a new person, and the first things they say, whatever the content, sets a tone. And this was a tone. There's sometimes a kind of fierceness about the Greens when they say that they're going to sort of come for the existing parties. And she did it with, certainly put down a marker there from the left, but she did do it with a certain charm. So I think she will land in Westminster with quite a kind of interest and some goodwill towards her, except possibly not from parts of Labour. She's absolutely mullered.
Right, there's an important subplot going on today in this by-election, so we ought to confront that and run into that straight away. Just after polls closed at 10:01, an organisation called Democratic Volunteers released a report. Now, they are an organisation that is given access to polling stations to make sure that elections are basically conducted fairly. They don't just do it in the UK, they do it all over the place. They get the nod from the Electoral Commission. They go in and they report what they see. And they don't often release a report this quickly. Normally it's a chin-stroking affair a few weeks after, but they felt that there were issues of concern that they wanted to raise straight away. The Observer team for this group saw family voting in 15 of the 22 polling stations. Now, family voting is where you see more than one person at the basically in the area where you fill in your ballot. This gives rise to the suspicion that there might be some coercion or encouragement for somebody to vote in a particular direction, although the Observer can't go that close, so they can't actually hear any conversation that takes place. They said that there were 9 cases of this in one polling station alone. They said that they observed a sample of 545 voters casting their votes, meaning 12% of those voters observed either caused or affected by family voting. So that in itself is important. Manchester Council, who control the election process, rejected that allegation. They said they hadn't seen anything in a pretty intemperate statement a few minutes after the report came out. I wonder whether that'll be the end of the matter for them. I suspect not. But Reform UK has jumped very strongly on that charge. And after Hannah Spencer's victories for the Greens, Nigel Farage put out really quite a punchy piece on social media saying this election was a victory for sectarian voting and cheating. And I think it's going to be fascinating to see just how far Reform UK take this, because that is the leader of a party saying that the Green Party were elected illegitimately, right? That's a hell of a claim. Now, are they going to look at any recourse in law? Are they going to try and challenge the result? The Green Party pointed out that their margin of victory is pretty hefty, 11 percentage points. And our own political analyst, Rob Ford, was saying on Sky earlier that really to do that, the Green Party will have needed to pick up votes not only in the South Asian Muslim communities, but in the white working class part of the constituency as well. So it isn't the case that a few votes from one part of the community will have got them over the line. So statistically, it's not clear that necessarily holds up. But cheating is a hell of a word to use. It's clear that there may well have been problems, though. So, Anne, where do you think this all leaves us?
I think everything you've said there raises a question for me about how reform deal with outcomes that don't entirely go their way, but yeah, they still beat Labour into third place. You know, they could have been majoring on that, but I think what they like to do at the moment is just turn up the volume, turn up the noise, whatever the outcome, or go to the max here on that charge, that which clearly needs to be taken very seriously about the accusations of family voting and what that might entail. But it's still quite a big leap, isn't it, to call it a victory for sectarian voting and cheating. We heard an echo of that also from Matt Goodwin, the candidate. I don't think progressives beat us, he said. They were told how to vote. It was a coalition of Islamists and woke progressives that came together to dominate the constituency. And many people will look at Gorton and Denton and be appalled. So there we see it again, the doubling down on that accusation. Now, it was always going to be very hard for Reform in this seat. And I thought that they would at this point be wielding the excuse, which would have been pretty plausible, that they hadn't won, but they pushed Labour into third. It wasn't the great sweep in a northern seat that they would have hoped for going into this. But I think instead, you're going to see more and more of these accusations and dividing lines when there is a Reform defeat. Question, does it come over as sour grapes? Or do people think, well, there's obviously something amiss if a party I disapprove of, if they're of a reform-minded or tempted towards reform, that they're not going to be happy to see the Greens and the aspects of the Greens are really not going to please them as things go along? Or does it always sound like, if reform doesn't win, it doesn't get a party bag to take home from the event? It sits in the corner and sulks. Just a question.
Yeah, it is interesting sometimes, and we've seen this a few times. We've discussed this a few times on this podcast. Nigel Farage and Reform's strategic anger and ability to draw the spotlight on himself can tip over into just a display of raw irritation. And I wondered where we were on that spectrum with the kind of reaction of Reform UK, because there is no doubt that the narrative, I think, overall isn't that bad for them. The government party was defeated. An insurgent party won. They performed creditably. They didn't win, but they made advances in the north in an unusual seat that they were always going to struggle in. So I think you're quite right. Right, let's turn to Labour, because I think the bulk of the rest of this podcast needs to be spent unpicking what this means for Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer owns this result by using his allies to block Andy Burnham on the National Executive Committee from standing, because he was a Metro mayor. Everybody but Lucy Powell, of course, voted against Burnham being able to stand. He put his own stamp on this by-election, and it has backfired. But that's not the real reason I think Keir Starmer's about to come under so much pressure. The problem that the Prime Minister faces is that what's happened is that the progressive wing of his support has bled to another party on the left, in this case, the Greens. And there has always been a fear that the way that Keir Starmer was governing and messaging and fighting to sort of fend off the reform challenge on his right flank might bleed votes on his left flank. Well, now that fear has been dramatically realised. And I think that means that there are going to be questions not only about Keir's decisions in the last few weeks, but the entire way he operated his premiership, going hard on immigration messages for some of it, campaigning with some pretty eye-watering language about benefits at times, and really owning that blue Labour agenda, which you were never sure was quite Keir. Always felt a bit more like Morgan McSweeney, but Maybe we have a prime minister who's pushed into certain positions by the people around it. So the first question I think that's going to be asked is, has Keir been getting his political strategy wrong for the last 19 months? And secondly, this was a constituency that the Labour brand could tie together the South Asian communities and the white working class communities. And it looks as if the vote for Labour crumbled in both of them. Labour can't knit any community together, not mind disparate ones like that. Is he the answer, therefore, to where we go next? Is he the tactician? Does he have the presence? Can he turn things around? I think there's just going to be so much worry.
And just how do people feel about this? Remember, it's only a few weeks ago since Keir Starmer, his leadership was wobbling, and it had to be sort of pulled back by turning Number 10 into a call centre and getting hold of ministers, and particularly cabinet ministers, to stabilise his leadership. That worked, but does this then give those people second thoughts about, do we do this again, or do we just think it's now we go another way? I'm just looking at something Richard Bergen, obviously left-wing MP for the campaign group, tweeting, blame for Labour's defeat lies squarely with Keir Starmer and his clique. They put factional interests over the candidate best placed to win, Andy Burnham. If Labour is to stop reform, it has to stop treating progressive voters with contempt. Now, okay, that's a Richard Bergen kind of tweet, but you see a lot of people, I think, Sam, will agree with it who don't share Bergen's politics in the round, because what we've seen is a lot of cognitive dissonance with the centre, with Number 10 saying that we've got this, we are the party who can best oppose reform, while, as you say, tacking to more blue Labour, more, as you'd see it, right-wing Labour positions on immigration, etc. In the end, here in this R&D lab of this by-election, it's not worked out. It's not worked out either way. Something else that struck me, and I don't know if you heard a bit of this, you were up there and I was down here at Westminster, cognitive dissonance right up to the end of last night, that Labour thought that they could still get it, that they were going to nail a narrow victory. I met a lot of senior Labour people at an event last night. Some of them had been campaigning. Senior figure in the Lords telling me she was much more confident now she'd been up there, seen the good ground game. I don't think what the bad ground game would look like. The Greens had bad data. There were a lot of talking points that Labour seemed to convince itself were true. 5-6 hours later, turned out not true at all, and it blows apart this idea. Playbook also meditating on this morning from Politico. Labour's argument that voting Green is wasted against reform, well, that turns out, that's an argument that has not prevailed. Surely that portends ill for Keir Starmer and his strategy.
Absolutely. Look, I think Labour's defeat will be a shock for large parts of the Labour Party. I absolutely believe that until a few days ago, Labour thought it was going to win. I heard it privately from so many people with less of a stake in the game than you might know, saying, no, I think we're going to hang on. I think it's going to be all right. We've got a massive ground game. The Greens don't have a ground game. Turns out they do. But you were just asking absolutely the right question about Labour's campaign. Who were Labour fighting in this by-election campaign? They were fighting reform. All the messaging was about it was them versus reform, and a completely different party beat them. And that's quite something. Were they fighting the right enemy, or is it just the truth that Labour's too squeamish to have a go at another progressive party beyond the line on drugs? And I think that's a really interesting and difficult philosophical thing that's going on. Right, I've got a whole load of blame game that's going on. It's been on my phone, dripping in as I've been on Sky all night.
I want the blame game. Bring on the blame game.
There are some who say, this is Shabana Mahmood's fault, this defeat. The hardline rhetoric and the policy of doubling the amount of time that you need to stay here before getting indefinite leave to remain. That is the thing that weaponised the voters to vote for the Greens. But then we had a counterattack from somebody else who was like, no, it was Gaza, the long tail of Keir Starmer's inept handling of the Gaza crisis that is the problem here. And then there's a third group who are basically saying Keir Starmer ignored the progressive end of his political coalition and that this should be the death of blue Labour. You're going to hear a lot in the coming days about, because we lost votes to the left, we've got to let Labour be Labour and be more progressive. But I've had a really, really stark warning against that from a very senior and thoughtful Labour figure, who just says this: whenever you hear people like Lucy Powell was on Sky earlier saying, let Labour be Labour, we should be more progressive, what is the alternative strategy that people want? What does closer to our values, get the politics right actually mean? Do they want more borrowing, higher personal taxes, higher welfare to rejoin the EU, looser immigration strategy? Any one of those might be acceptable, they said, but, don't you end up losing the country if you go in that direction for the sake of a few votes that have been lost to the Greens? This isn't a representative seat, and you've got to be very, very careful.
Yeah, exactly. And you do have to be it's a quite particular Labour headspace, I put it politely, to think that things like that list that you read out together. I mean, there are lots of trade-offs within that, right? It's not that there's this one clear playbook now where you can go not as far as the harder left, your parties, where Jeremy Corbyn is going to be coming after you again with the left of the Greens to support him. But that there's a kind of sweet spot in the analysis that you've been picking through there, Sam, that says, well, there's a bit where you just move a bit left and suddenly your values, clock with people and it tracks with the electorate. I mean, the experience of that in the past has been that tended not to be the outcome. Do they learn the wrong lessons from Gorton and Denton? But I'm curious. I mean, I can't really ask to see the contents of your phone, much as I would love to. But there is a bit of a sense that if this kind of analysis would benefit Angela Rayner, could therefore be lines that maybe Angela Rayner might push, not so much because there's a ready recipe there, but if she and her allies can take the conversation in this direction, it benefits them against those who hold power at the moment. Or am I being unduly cynical?
Oh, no, I think you're absolutely right. Look, I think that there is going to be a battle for the soul of the Labour Party right now. And I think we know what side of that Angela Rayner is on. And I'm sure her allies are pushing a message, because it's going to be popular with Labour members who will vote in the next leader, that you need to be more progressive. I think not everybody would agree with that, but that is the battle that's to come. Of course, we just have a prime minister where you're never quite sure that he has enough of a grip on the politics to be able to referee between the different groups pushing him around, because he was in a very different space. Will he now try and pivot to save his own skin? And would that work? I don't think we're in a territory where we're going to get an overt challenge in the next few days to Keir Starmer, but I did get one Labour MP who is now newly calling for him to go. They're a 2024 MP, they're a moderate MP, not on the left of the party, but they simply said if the cabinet continues to back Keir Starmer, Nigel Farage will be our next prime minister. So we are getting an uptick in the number of people who just think he should go. But I think that is a fight delayed until after May. But I wouldn't rule out all-out abject panic, and Keir Starmer is not good at these moments.
The dynamics are such that things tend to move perhaps ahead of what might seem strictly rational, like let's wait and see and let's have Keir take the pain of the result. It reminds me also, I'm hearing a lot from senior Labour people, including I think people around cabinet, who've been expecting pretty hardline reshuffle coming from Keir Starmer in order to regain authority after what happened to him a couple of weeks ago, perhaps to punish West Streeting. And this is talking to people who are close to West Streeting, who've worked with West Streeting, who share a lot of his more reformist agenda on healthcare, are still saying, I think, Wes has been quite damaged. And unless he can find a way back into Keir's good books, he could even be facing being moved from his job. But where does something like this? This is what I mean when people say, oh, well, it won't happen till such and such a date. Well, I've generally found in the last few weeks, pretty much everything going on in the UK is the dates happen faster than perhaps the predictions that if you just wait another week or two, it'll all be all right. I think at this point, if you can get through May, but you may also think about, what's going on in Keir Starmer's head. How does he want to frame how he goes into those May elections? Yes, he's competitive. He loves fighting back, and that's the way he saw what he achieved in staying in power. But now he is really going to come under attack for his judgment and for the way that this by-election was handled, Yeah, it's a specific seat, Sam. But if this kind of judgment or misjudgment keeps repeating, at some point, one feels that the ground might give beneath him.
I think people might express some judgment about our concept of 20 minutes because the alarms
has it stretched?
It has. It's been a massive night and a massive morning, but we have bust over our limit a little bit. Forgive us. There's a lot to say. It's a very, very dramatic time. So thank you for sticking with us. We'll be back on Monday with more of the latest. Do keep listening because I think things are going to pick up in pace, even if there isn't a leadership challenge. Stick with it because we'll give you the twists and turns sort of from the inside. And I think we're the only place that you can do that on a daily basis. So I look forward to having you back on Monday and look forward to seeing you then, Anne.
Let us know whether you think we were right or wrong, right? This is fascinating stuff. We love to hear from listeners. Please tell us how you're seeing it, and tell me where Sam got it wrong, and just tell me that my stuff was great, and I'll be like, that's good for me. See you on Monday.
See you then.